கொண்டிருப்பது உங்கள் அற்புத ரேசு டிவி, சென்னையின் முதல் கத்தோலிக்க சேனல்.
வணக்கம். என்னோட பேர் நெல்சன் ஆண்டனி ஜோக்கியம், அற்புத ரேசு டிவியோட ஃபவுண்டர். இப்போ நீங்க பார்த்து கொண்டு இருக்கும் இந்த வீடியோவை ஷேர் பண்ணுங்க நான் உங்களை ரெக்வெஸ்ட் பண்றேன். மறக்காம இந்த வீடியோக்கு கடைசியில இருக்கிற அந்த அக்கவுண்ட் டீடைல்ஸ் இருக்கு. உங்களுக்கு வேணும்னா நீங்க உங்களால முடிஞ்ச காணிக்கைய நீங்க தரலாம். நன்றி. உங்களோட அற்புத இயேசு டிவிக்காக நெல்சன் ஆண்டனி ஜோக்கியம். தேங்க்யூ.
Dear brothers and sisters, a rich sight of God and a rich sight of man or woman. A rich sight of God, a rich sight of human. These are the two great stepping stones which help us, enable us to build up the relationship with God. And if you see the readings of the day, they invite us to focus our attention asking a simple question: do we really see the reality of God's sight? In other words, are we able to see the sight of God properly? If we see the sight of God properly, I am sure the sight of God tells us that our eyesight is beautiful. I would like to narrate with a small story. It is taken from the Sufi story. A Muslim was on his horseback chasing the enemy in order to kill him. And while he was chasing the enemy, in the middle of the chase, he heard a prayer. A bell rang for prayer. Immediately, he got off his horse and unrolled his prayer mat. You know, the Muslims have the prayer mat. And opened the prayer. And he kept on saying all the prayers possible in hurry. And as early as possible, he wanted to finish the prayer and get back on his horse in order to kill the enemy. And he has done that. He finished his prayers, immediately got on his horse back and started moving or chasing the enemy. Brothers and sisters, he had finished the requirements of the law. He had finished the requirements of the law. But he was blind, really blind, to fulfill what really the law requires. He had fulfilled the law, but he has failed. In other words, he has become blind to fulfill what really the law requires, namely a change of heart. And he was blind enough. Therefore, he could not stop. He could not change himself. He could not stop the killing the enemy or chasing the enemy. Brothers and sisters, the readings of the day invite us beautifully. If you see the first reading, God wanted, according to his sight, the sight has fallen in the heart of man, not the outward appearance. And therefore he called Samuel to call off the last son of Jesse, David, and he had chosen. God's eyesight has fallen on this particular man, David, a shepherd boy, youngest man in the family, and God wanted him to be a great man. Therefore, brothers and sisters, our eyesight, our look may be according to the appearance, outward appearance, but God looks in the heart of the man. Therefore, whatever the prayer that we make, whatever the offerings that we do, God only looks not the sacrifices, but sees the heart of the man. And also we have the second reading, St. Paul telling once again the light and the darkness, belief and unbelief, and also saying, we were once upon a time, you were children of the light. That darkness has taken you away. The darkness has really put you away from the sight of God. And St. Paul once again telling, arise from the dead and Christ shall give you the light. You know, brothers and sisters, the symbol of darkness is nothing but once again talking about the sin. And therefore St. Paul tells, arise from the dead, arise from the sinful life and see the light that is shining. See the light that is giving you the brightness. And the people, the community of Ephesians, they had two kinds of life. When there was an opportunity to live the luxurious life, they were happy to go after the sin. But when St. Paul began to emphasize on the life of light, the life of faith, the light of faith, again they were awakened. But then, dear brothers and sisters, Jesus in the gospel of the day tells beautifully two types of players he has found. The first type of player is the blind man with his parents. Second type of player is the Pharisees who were not blind. The two players, Jesus came in between and has done a miracle. That miracle is nothing but not only the physical sight, much more than that, spiritual sight. And the Pharisees began to accuse Jesus by performing this miracle. They said, how could he do on that Sabbath day? How could this man, being a sinner, could perform this miracle? And Jesus just taken the spat or taken the mud and put on these blind man's, go and wash yourself in Siloam. And it was a medicinal. And Jesus did not simply do taking a mud and spitting on it and making a saliva and putting on the man's eyes. If you read the Gospel of Mark chapter 8 verse 23, there was also a miracle that Jesus performed to the blind man in Bethsaida. Same thing. So you found Jesus found something medicinal from the nature. And the Pharisees accused him for performing this miracle as well. And finally they thought all the disciples of his would follow him and the Jesus would become famous. So these Pharisees once again, they try to block, criticize Jesus performing the miracles. But then, dear brothers and sisters, we have in the gospel how this blind man encountered Jesus. Beautifully, in 4 ways, how this blind man recognized Jesus, how he could find Jesus, who Jesus is. First one, when he was encountered by Jesus, Jesus saw in this blind man a ray of hope. And how could he find out? When the Pharisees began to ask him, who healed you? How did you get the sight? And first, this blind man said, that man, Jesus. He used the word the man, Jesus. And second time, when they questioned him about the healing, he said, he is a prophet. And third time, when they were intimidating him so much, he said, he is the man has come from God. And because of that, Pharisees threw him out of the town. Jesus went there and asked him, do you believe that I am the Son of Man? And he would not understand. And at the end he said, Lord, I do believe. Dear brothers and sisters, we talk about the miracles that to happen to us in simple. If you want to experience the miracles in our life, whether you are physically blind, spiritually blind, simple way. We need to call upon the name of Jesus as a blind man did. And secondly, without knowing, this blind man, born blind, he said he is a prophet. Now who is a prophet for him? Prophet is the one, dear brothers and sisters, who comforts the discomforted. Prophet is the one who discomforts the comforted. If you look at the Old Testament, many prophets came and announced the good news, the news from Yahweh. What did they announce? They announced those people who are living in idol worship, those who are comfort in idol worship, he discomforted them. Not good. And those who are discomforted, life was in misery, helplessness, they gave the comfort. So this blind man knew about that. Once again, he said, he is a prophet. He is a prophet. And thirdly, he said, he is the man come from God. Only God can do that. This born blind man telling the Pharisees who knows A to Z about the laws and telling him once again, he is really the man come from God. Only God can do this. When Jesus came to know about that, bearing witness to this, Jesus goes to the blind man. Do you believe that there is Son of Man? He said, Lord, I do believe. Brothers and sisters, this is how we do experience miracles happening in our life. But as readings tell us to reflect more about our mainly spiritual blindness. Secondly, get rid of the cultural blindness. Now, what is the meaning of the spiritual blindness? We need to allow God, the healer, to heal our spiritual blindness. How do we experience this spiritual blindness? I am sure most of us are not blind. All of us have the proper sight. Therefore, as I said in the beginning, our eyesight, the rich eyesight, really reflects on the eyesight of God. And how do we allow Jesus, the healer, to heal our spiritual blindness? Brothers and sisters, in today's world, we live in a world called rat race world, digitalized world, comparison world. And to avoid that kind of spiritual blindness, and also St. Paul talks in his letter to the Galatians chapter 5 verses 19 onwards, the works of the flesh. If you avoid that, those are the things that make us spiritually blind. If we try to avoid that, then we can experience that we are spiritually healed. Our eyesight, spiritual eyesight is being healed. Otherwise, we go on living in this world like the Pharisees, pride and the prejudice. There were so much prejudiced people only attacking Jesus, tried to trap Jesus through this born blind man getting healed. When we are angry with ourselves, when we are prejudiced mind people, we go on, pay attention. Our eyesight, as the first reading tells, we only look at the persons outwardly. We don't enjoy the inner voice, inner conversion, inner sight that God has given. And therefore, brothers and sisters, secondly, we need to reflect about the get rid of our cultural blindness. Now, cultural blindness is very simple. We know in today's technology, everything scientifically, there is a proof. But we do fail in a way. We know that our life begins from the birth. Life begins from the conception. But then we go for the abortion. Cultural blindness. We know about the love that has to be cherished, nourished. But then that parental love has become selfish instead of selfless. Cultural blindness. We know, brothers and sisters, the life that we need to live upon on this planet and today's world. The whole world is shattered because of this global sickness, coronavirus. We need to get rid of this cultural blindness. We know the cause for this coronavirus. But then, what are we doing? How do we prevent this? I began to say our eyesight is very rich. When we see as God has seen with his sight every person in the heart. If you see the person's heart, our eyesight is beautiful. But then, dear brothers and sisters, St. Augustine of Hippo beautifully tells, after his conversion, after his change of life, he said, I entered in the sight of God, he says, I entered in and saw the eye of my soul in him. And that was unchangeable sight when he compared with the earthly sight, earthly light. I entered in and saw the eye of my soul only in him, in his light, which is unchangeable. That's what the life of St. Augustine of Hippo. And we have beautiful Pope telling once again on the Lenten message, Benedict the 16th beautifully said, these Pharisees failed to understand the sight of God. They failed to understand from this miracle the sight of God. But we need to invite God into our life to have the inner sight to enjoy the richness of life. Because Pope tells about the life that he has lived and telling we need to invite that God's sight so that we enjoy our sight is becoming rich and rich every day. Dear brothers and sisters, and another beautiful person, St. John Chrysostom tells, when from the passage of the day, when these people put this man, blind man, out of the temple, Jesus brought him into the temple. We are physically all right, well with our sight. But what puts us away is simply the spiritual blindness. And that spiritual blindness is, brothers and sisters, as I said already, the works of the flesh. But Jesus says, in John's Gospel, chapter 8, verse 12, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not see in darkness, but live in the light of life. And that's what we have also the letter to Galatians, chapter 5, verses 22 onwards, the gifts of the Spirit. And that should enable us to live upon the sight that God has given us. And we can get rid of all our spiritual blindness, brothers and sisters, not only physically, but when we step into the sight of the other person, believing, trusting, and also hoping that God will do wonders in our life. As we partake in this celebration, let us ask the Lord for the grace so that we may see everyone as we see ourselves spiritually.
நீங்கள் பார்த்துக் கொண்டிருப்பது உங்கள் அற்புத ரேசு டிவி, சென்னையின் முதல் கத்தோலிக்க சேனல்.
வணக்கம். என்னோட பேர் நெல்சன் ஆண்டனி ஜோக்கியம், அற்புத ரேசு டிவியோட ஃபவுண்டர். இப்போ நீங்க பார்த்து கொண்டு இருக்கும் இந்த வீடியோவை ஷேர் பண்ணுங்க நான் உங்களை ரெக்வெஸ்ட் பண்றேன். மறக்காம இந்த வீடியோக்கு கடைசியில இருக்கிற அந்த அக்கவுண்ட் டீடைல்ஸ் இருக்கு. உங்களுக்கு வேணும்னா நீங்க உங்களால முடிஞ்ச காணிக்கைய நீங்க தரலாம். நன்றி. உங்களோட அற்புத இயேசு டிவிக்காக நெல்சன் ஆண்டனி ஜோக்கியம். தேங்க்யூ.